every single application support team has a consistent backlog. It's a massive backlog. They can't get to things that they want to get to. And so they're running the system. They're not engineering the system, right?
What's been new? I mean, it sounds like you guys have been really, really busy recently, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what's been new on your end?
100%. Yeah, I mean, a lot of fun stuff. I think we, officially launched the product like over a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you guys were, one of the first people to try it out. And since then, it's really come a long way because we started out with search, like the ability to bring information to the admin faster. We heard a lot of admins spending a lot of time on community. We heard a lot of admins that were in r/Workday, and we're like, there has to be a better way. And so we started with AI search and with the Workday partnership, citing back sources to Workday community, giving admins faster results, contextualizing the feedback, and then training the model on it so that it got rapidly better.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen this personally, but
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Anecdotally, at least from some of our customers, we've heard that like AI search is actually like really good now compared to where it was when it started. So yeah, it's been interesting starting with that as like kind of our wedge. But I say that's the wedge because there's so much more that the admin does, right? The admin's not just looking through vendor forums all day. The admin's interfacing with stakeholders and meetings. The admin is trying to strategically think about what is the right work environment to set up for an end stakeholder based off of the governance controls that have been set and whatever's been configured in the tenant prior. It's like there's so much intelligence that's required in the job, right? That we're like Mando's like kind of at the lower end of the stack, and our job is to see can we actually move up the stack and can we multiply what the admin can do so that we're not just kind of saving you time, but we're actually literally like, can we clone the output of Christian and have multiple Christians, and that way you're able to do purely strategic work. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of like, where we've been trying to take the product into documentation. You've probably seen AI docs, right?
Absolutely.
So that's our take around everything that the admin is doing is captured visually. They see it. So what if we were able to give a browser extension a pair of eyes, and train it on configuration so it understands the layout of your systems, not exactly what's in the system, but how the system was set up. And that also ended up becoming really popular amongst admins. And we started to realize like, hey, these actually are more related than we might think. Search and docs, we've kind of treated them somewhat separately, but we're starting to realize that docs is a pretty big source of truth. When someone does record a process using our extension, we know that they're basically recording or institutionalizing that knowledge.
Yeah.
And then people want to search over that, right? Yep. And pull that up in real time. And so that's kind of where the product has moved towards now. Where we're more of like, I would say, it used to be like if some teams didn't want to have AI docs, they didn't need it, right? We would just put them on AI search. But now it's like you get the whole platform, and it's almost like a requirement, right? Like if you're using Mando, you're using the Chrome extension. Every single action that you're doing inside of your Workday tenant is being passively captured by the Chrome extension. That's all searchable in real time to everybody. That allows us to actually build up test suites so that agents can actually go in. If you went and clicked on something in the morning and you want someone to go and test it, you could just tell an agent to go and test it because it saw you do it earlier.
Yes.
So that's kind of that's the exciting future that we're in now, a year later. But I'll pause. That's like high level progress.
No, absolutely. So I should probably just right off the top just say it's been almost a year to the date that we had our first podcast conversation.
Oh, no way. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So
there we go. Yeah.
Just think back to the last calendar year and how much progress this AI has made, right?
Yeah, it's insane.
Just across the board, right? Workday, non-Workday related. Mm-hmm. It is insanity. It is just a completely different world that we live in based off of that AI progress, right?
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, Mando definitely falls into this case as well, right? It was great when we recorded our first conversation. Really excited about the platform. And it's just a night and day difference. It's just funny, like my expectations of like, oh my gosh, this works, to now like, of course it works, like, yes. and being able to trust it in that way of like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been working, like this is great.
Totally.
Yeah.
What do you think on your side that you've been seeing, right, from the AI models in your day to day, where you're like a year ago couldn't do that, but now you do it all the time, and you're like, this is a constant.
Yes.
This is not something that is a surprise anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found myself having different types of conversation with Mando. Whereas before, I think I was trying to babysit it a little bit or pacify, some of my prompts. Now I'm really talking to it almost like I would talk to like an AMS provider or like a
Yep.
consultant,
Yep.
someone who knows a little bit more than me,
Yep.
and just saying like, hey, what are your thoughts about this? What are your
Yep.
thoughts about this? Right? I'll give you an example. So Orchestrate for integrations just became generally available R2 of last year. R2 of 2025. And so that's been a new functionality that I've been diving into myself. And I have a lot to learn, right? But Mando has been incredibly helpful in learning some of these new components that I've never touched before, right? So there was I think it's called like a validation component, something along those lines, where I could validate some of the values that I'm creating in Orchestrate. And so I was in Mando and pretty much asked it like, what are some use cases for this step? And it brought back so many use cases. And like one of those use cases was exactly what I needed. It was good validation for me to understand like, okay, what I'm trying to use this for is exactly the use case that, this component was designed for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say like talking to it like a consultant, something that has access to information that I just don't. And then almost like a trainer, right? Like, again, something that has a little bit more access to knowledge that I just don't have, right? Something that I can learn from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we did architecturally was incorporating reasoning models over Mando, which we were always
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we were kind of a little afraid of that. Like, earlier it was purely like pulling search results. So kind of like what you mentioned, if you engineer a certain search into Mando, you'd get a really good result.
Yeah.
But that was kind of like, we didn't want to create the whole community search problem all over again.
Yes.
But the problem is with reasoning models is they're just generating tokens, they're generating words above words. And so it's like, what if they generate something inconsistent and then they mislead an admin? And in our company, we just kind of make decisions around what's best for the admin. And so at the time, we're like, that's not best for the admin. But when reasoning models can consistently reason accurately, off of the information set that they're given, that's where the search space, like the kind of questions you can ask just greatly increases, like what you're mentioning. And that's kind of what you're seeing on your side. And shout out to the AI labs and the model providers, right? They're leaps and bounds in terms of how much more powerful these models are, make application companies like Mando 10 times more powerful. And we're able to sort of just pick up on those tailwinds that they're providing for us. So yeah. I was actually more so asking Christian outside of Mando. Like, I'm sure you've been messing around with Claude, and I've seen your videos, so I know that you do a good amount of hacking. And for me as a developer, like, it's just been insane, right? Like a year ago until now, I mean, you used to basically get, like, if you wanted to use LLMs when you were coding, you'd use them for certain diffs or certain sections of your code to basically as an auto-generate tool or checking what you had done. But now it's pretty much like it could rip an entire code base, it can spin up sub-agents to go and test the code base, it can do it in a sandbox environment, and it's just like, it's getting nuts, right? So I'm curious on your side, like, what are you experimenting with, that per se experimenting with a year ago?
Yeah. I would say, and we'll probably get to this in just a little bit, but just all of the brand new features. I've tried to make it a habit to understand a brand new feature that comes out in a way that is practical. So I'll give you an example, like the scheduled tasks for Claude Code on the web and Cowork, right? Like, these are cool. They're really awesome, but I want to know from like a practical use case perspective, like, do they work and how well do they work? And like, where does it work better than maybe instances where it just doesn't necessarily work, right?
Yep.
So that's been really fascinating to like experiment in that way and trying to, again, pull this all the way back to how do I become the most efficient, more strategic like Workday admin that I can be given the technology, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So
I love that.
I think generally speaking, like, I'm really trying to make sure that I don't stop at like, wow, that's a really cool feature. I'm trying to take it all the way to like, let me build something, right? Because the technology is there to just prototype and understand the limitations of that technology.
Yeah, previously you'd have to like read a repo. Now you can take the GitHub repo link and just paste it into LLM. And there you go. It understands everything that's going on. It's starting to build a prototype off of it. Yeah, it's like the duration, right, from like judgment to execution is collapsing.
Yes.
rapidly. Yeah, it's really interesting. It totally influences the way me and Adi think about Mando because kind of what you're mentioning, which is like as an admin, can I be doing more? We actually think about it, on a macro sense. So like if an organization's adopting Mando, they're obviously adopting us because they've taken a bet on an application. Like in, your case, Workday, right?
Yeah. Yep.
In other admins' cases, Coupa, ServiceNow, Salesforce, right? You can name the application ecosystem, but there is a group of executives that have spent a lot of money and a lot of reputation on that system.
Absolutely.
And the truth is the systems are actually good. It's kind of, maybe that's a hot take. Maybe that could be the clip of the podcast right there.
Right.
Because I know there's the SaaS apocalypse and like all of these.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get into that in just a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, all the Wall Street folks not liking, our ecosystems.
Yep.
But the beauty of these applications is that they're actually very feature dense, very feature rich. LLMs are actually making companies like Workday and SAP and Oracle, these so-called legacy companies, pump out more features, if you've noticed in the releases, because their engineers have access to these LLMs too, obviously.
Yes.
Right? So
yep.
They're able to put more features into the product. And I guess where the drop-off always happens is when the vendor needs to get the product into the customer's hands, and there's that handoff, right, from the product that the vendor's designed to the implementation partner to the customer, that the customer ends up with a somewhat templated system. And then that's inherited by some admins that have like a massive backlog of actual work. And so you never get to actually experiment with the system in like a forward-thinking way, right? You're kind of always like, on go mode, right? And you're always playing reactive.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
Like Workday, believe it or not, especially with the new interface changes, we at Mando, we're a really small company, but we have 20 folks. We do have Workday. We're Workday customers. But if I wanted to, specify a certain interface for Adi, I totally could, right? But it's just like, is it worth the effort to actually go and do that when I have to go and understand why payroll is misconfigured?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then Adi's complaining like, oh, the software's so ugly, it doesn't look good. That's like kind of what's going on, right? Like
Absolutely.
A lot of people think these service providers are delivering poor software, but it's like, no, the software is actually like really powerful. It's so powerful to the point where like there's so much to do in it that the admins that are tasked to manage it have a massive backlog, and then they can't do all the crazy cool stuff. And then at some point, the executives are like, where's the ROI?
Yes.
And it's like this like interesting loop, right? I don't know, at least being in the ecosystem for over 2.5 years now, 3 years, I guess, since we founded Mando, that's kind of the cycle I've seen.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have no idea how much I am spending my day just questioning, like, why was the system implemented in this way, right? And obviously, hindsight is 2020, but being part of the system, it's just fascinating. I've been part of the ecosystem for 4 years, and I'm still coming back to that thought process of like, wow, like we really missed the mark here, and now it's on me to get us back onto the straight and narrow and get this system returning some sort of ROI for the company. Right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think a lot of admins like yourself have been at organizations that have seen success, right? And so sometimes you join a new organization, they're not seeing that level of ROI, but it's not your fault. You can't go in and rip out the implementation and change the system from scratch. Yeah, it's a common thing that we see, but I think the inspiring thing for us out of seeing all the advances in the AI models is like kind of how I operate now with like even software engineering, where I'm going and defining a spec. I'm defining a group of test cases that need to pass, and then I walk away from my laptop, right?
Yep.
And when I'm on my walk, I think about, okay, if those tests pass and they come back green, what is the next feature that I'm building?
Yes.
And in a weird way, on that walk, it's actually like forward thinking. It's not like usually when I used to go on a walk, I'm like, oh shit, I need to walk fast so I can come back home and I can go and finish this.
Yes. Yep.
And so it's like that shift in thinking is very massive. The fact that developers have gotten that power, developers are very lucky. I want to bring that to admins. Right?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really where we've like rooted the entire product suite and kind of how we've been envisioning everything. And we're like, okay, can we actually make the admin forward thinking, purely forward thinking, and the system is executing pretty much everything, which is kind of how engineers operate now, right? Which is so crazy that shift happened so fast. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's just so many different implications to exactly what you're describing, right? But I really want to drive this point home. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing this, completely fine, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm curious to know how much code is being handwritten at Mando.
Oh my God. Honestly, none. Yeah, none. We don't.
So 0% of your code is handwritten.
Handwritten code. The code itself, I would say, is not being handwritten unless we need to go and make a param change or a config change. And obviously, Adi's going to be watching this later, and Adi in there.
He's going to hate you for this, yeah.
No, the truth is that when it comes to actual code generation itself, right? That's being done by AI because going and typing, the speed of typing that is in fact like just it's just a loss, right? Why would you
Yeah,
do that? It's a net loss in productivity. But the architecture and everything that we do, obviously, that's really where we spend most of our time.
exactly. Yep.
And yeah, I would say there is some code, obviously, even now that cannot be AI generated. A lot of things in terms of like even how we've configured our AI infrastructure to run. That unfortunately you cannot just go and generate entire code blocks there. But on areas of the application, for example, where we have a button state or a modal that's opening or an alert, like, yeah, it makes way more sense to totally generate that code and then make sure that you're intelligent as an engineer to understand how that integrates into your code base properly and doesn't break production and
Yes.
break customers' enterprise environments. That's like that I kind of ripped through that at the end, but that's the most important part. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I would say that's kind of a big shift for us. And I'd say most companies that are, I'd say probably every single startup, at least a high growth startup, is doing the same thing. Trying to make sure that they can move fast, but do it in a way that's secure and not breaking anything in the product. So it's always a balance between those two things, but nothing being manually written, I would say at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that I ask is because I'm hearing this across the board, right? Especially on like Twitter, Reddit. I'm seeing this across the board. It really does feel like the value add from software engineers is the reviewing of code and not
Yep.
the writing of code, right?
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so if we apply that to the Workday world, right, that means that maybe pretty soon the value add of a Workday admin is going to be the testing, maybe not even the testing, right, but the revision of business process changes, right, business process configurations,
Totally.
and not necessarily we're the ones doing all of the configuration, the creating of condition rules, creating of calculated fields, right? We
Totally.
won't necessarily be the ones to do it, but we're going to be the ones to check it and make sure that it's good, right? And it won't break
Yeah.
anything in production.
Yeah, yeah. I also think one of the interesting things too is like we were especially a company that started before all of this, right? There are companies that are being founded today itself, and I think that's where it gets really tricky because the models are so good now that they could potentially go and rip like when I've been prototyping with Claude Code, for example, I'll notice that there are a lot of params that it'll include or dependencies that don't exist. It's just put it there, right? And when I'm
No
manually
way.
reviewing code, I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like I never particularly asked for that, but it's almost like anticipating that I would ask for like that slider feature or for that to be animated. And so it's almost like thinking of that ahead of time, but in a production code base, those kinds of, mistakes just create a lot of debt.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I feel bad for startup companies that are being started now because it's so tempting to use the model to actually do the work that the human could do. But the challenge is once you take that path, you continuously take that path, right?
Yes.
And then there's just a lot of debts. Luckily, at least with us, it was Adi who wrote, the first lines of Mando's code base. And then from there, just a lot of manual diffing and effort and architecture. So now to the point where if you do have an AI agent that comes into Mando's code base and then looks at it and tries to write some messy code and then tries to push that, it's just not going to pass, right? Having really sound architecture, I think, is paramount, is even more important. And in the Workday analogy world, it's almost like, yeah, the configuration of your tenant. And if you have agents that are going in and messing around with your system, and you don't have a proper approach to governance and configuration inside of your enterprise environment, there's going to be a lot of challenges, and you're going to arguably have the opposite ROI out of those agents.
Yeah.
That you won't see. Initially, you won't see it. It'll feel great. Like initially, things will be working. You'll be like, oh my God, I did this thing so fast. Like, wow, the future's here. Payroll won't run on a Friday. It might not be that drastic, but things will break, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what people need to be wary of in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So we hopefully have set the stage for kind of AI capabilities at this point, right?
Yep.
There's been this inflection point that everyone's talking about since probably like Thanksgiving or even December timeframe of 2025. I can really feel that, right? And there have been a couple inflection points since then, but there have also been some really big debates that have happened, right? So I want to get your take on a couple of the just high level debates, right? So
Sure.
is AI eating SaaS, right? Or is AI coming for these SaaS companies, especially from an enterprise perspective? And if so, to what extent?
Yeah, and so just to define that clearer, you mentioned enterprise perspective. So you're talking about legacy SaaS, like is AI
Absolutely.
basically coming to
Yeah.
eat legacy SaaS? Like, yeah, I would argue. I think like this, it's an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
Because it comes down to the management teams at the end of the day of these legacy companies.
Yeah.
Because this is not like AI is not something that's inaccessible to everybody. It's actually accessible to everybody, so including the incumbents, right?
Yeah.
Usually when you have disruption in a space, it's because the startup has figured out something that the incumbent hasn't,
Oh,
right?
fascinating. Okay.
And
Yeah.
they're able to use that as their advantage, right?
Yeah.
But now, like at Workday, for example, if it takes longer to prototype a feature, like if an engineer at Workday cannot prototype a feature within a week and a startup can, that's just like a governance problem at Workday, right? Like that's just like a process problem at Workday at that point.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, previously you needed all of that process because to actually go and push that code and make that change would require a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
But if, again, like we mentioned, judgment to execution has collapsed and you can actually make that change faster and you're not doing that as a company, you're literally like just killing yourself, right? Like, why are you doing that, right? So I think the management teams are very aware of this. Very insulting probably to a lot of these execs at SAP and Salesforce and Workday for people to just be like, you really think that we're not going to use this incredible technology ourselves to make our products better? So I think the argument that like AI is eating legacy SaaS usually comes in like two forms. One is like companies don't need to buy Workday or SAP anymore. They'll build it themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Or the other form is like Workday is going to get eaten by some like AI native competitor, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's one of the two. So I think like, I was primarily giving the counter to the competitive argument, right? Where I'm like, okay, Workday's not going to be sitting around. I mean, there's a company called Rippling. You've probably heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
Workday's very aware of Rippling, and they have the whole Go implementation going down market to compete with systems like Deal and Rippling at the EOR level, right? Like this is pre-AI. And now that AI is here, I mean, it just hasn't changed anything. They're still going to compete, right? Like they're going to probably compete harder, right? They're probably going to use AI. They have more budget than you as a startup to put towards GPU bills.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's like, I don't know. I think people often look at history and then kind of like pattern match in an incorrect way. I think that's kind of might be part of what's happening. And then in terms of companies building it internally, I think you might know the answer there, right? Like if your employer came to you and told you to vibe code the entire system that you also need to configure and manage for all of your employees, come back with a budget and come back with a timeline.
Not happening. Not happening.
It's just, I don't know. I think that's just a disconnected from reality argument, right? So I don't know. I don't have a really good counter there. That's just like you don't know how things work in the real world then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think these management teams of the legacy SaaS companies are really effective. People also forget about the lock-in of these companies, ecosystem lock-in, contract lock-in, vendor lock-in. Oh my God, like all these crazy things that are happening that they've set up over the years, and it's like so hard to break out of those things. But what it's going to do is it's going to make them stay on top of their toes more. Every single one of their competitors now can basically build like for Workday, for example, to go and build like Salesforce previously, it didn't make sense.
Yes.
Like, why are they going to go and take on CRM data models and all that kind of stuff? But hey, maybe we do it now, right? Like maybe we acquire this startup and give them a budget, all right? And provision this many GPUs for them to run up the token cost and like generate some code of a feature that could potentially be sold to compete with Salesforce.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things I think they're going to be doing. And so, yeah, I think it's like a mispricing event.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a little bit of a different take, especially with your last statement here. I wonder if these legacy SaaS companies will maybe stay in their lane a little bit more, right? And focus on their core functionality, right? Mm-hmm. I do wonder, Workday has a backlog of just brainstorms,
100%. Yeah.
Right. Things on their ideation hub right now that they're wanting to tackle, right?
Totally.
A lot of it has to do with their core functionality. And I wonder if they start to just crush those out or like bang those out, right? 100%. Like one by one.
In terms of priority, I think 100%. They'll just dive that's a great point. They're going to get even better at the HRS user. Like that's going to be their first thing, right? And be the absolute best at it. Have every feature under the sun that an HRS buyer needs to have. They'll have it inside of their product. And I think I was kind of jumping ahead. I'm like, all right, what do they do next to get market cap?
That's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think some of the auxiliary features is what starts to get vibe coded, right? Maybe not like a CRM, right? But I'm thinking they just retired this, but they had a slides functionality that was like a PowerPoint in Workday, right?
Yes, yeah.
Something like that, I could totally see someone just vibe coding.
Yeah, them bringing it back. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think they will really be dominant in the lane that they've dominated in already. Mm-hmm. And they're just going to take that to the next level. It is what I feel, right?
Totally. It's also like they do need to be the system of record for agents. That is really important, right? Because if you do think about it and the HR teams are going and provisioning all these random agent companies, right? It's like there needs to be I think they called it a command center at SKO.
Yes.
Like there needs to be something like that, right, for agents. I think that is a smart marketing play. Now, what does that mean from an engineering standpoint? I really don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, these systems should be secure enough that you can integrate an agent securely into them if they're going to be allowed to integrate into Workday systems. But yeah, I think you're spot on. Like they're gonna totally dominate their existing users even more. But I do even see a singularity event there, right? I'm like, okay, at some point, like, I mean, they'll have market share is expanding, right? Like you need to go after every single market. Yeah. And you've noticed this with like probably companies like SAP, right? Doing a good job with like having ERP software and then having success factors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Software to actually run people. So making that more full platform bet, I think we'll see in probably, I don't know, 3 to 5 years from every single major vendor. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be really interesting, right? There's going to be a ton of overlap, a ton of competition as well, right? So that'll be really interesting. Okay, so let's jump to the next debate because I think this one is just as fascinating. Is AI eating UI, right? User interface. Is that is that going away, or what are your thoughts there?
You're asking the wrong person on this. Yeah, I would say the reason why I say that is because our whole company is rooted around like this visual data thing, right?
Yes.
Like,
yep.
So just refresher for the audience, right? Like when you get set up on Mando, you have to install a Chrome extension. So that Chrome extension is actually, and when you set up the Chrome extension, we ask you a bunch of questions when you set it up. We ask you kind of what are your application environment URLs, provide that to us. Like what is your role? What is your level of access in this environment? And that gets configured and baked into the extension. So now the extension's never, when you go and open up a YouTube tab, for example, in your browser, it doesn't care, it's not looking at it. Yeah. But when you go and open up Sandbox and you're going and touching, you're escalating a role permission and that screen has been flagged previously, now it's looking and it's starting to see, are you making a change? So visual data to us is something that's really important. And I think the reason for that is because there is this debate, right? Are UIs gonna exist anymore? Comes back to like, why were UIs created in the first place? Because if you think of even like a terminal, it's a form of UI. And it's probably the most clean form of UI at the end of the day that goes from human to machine. And then there's this assumption that that's kind of all we need. And then it's going to be machine to machine from there, right? And so therefore, we just need prompting, right? Funny enough, like the simplest interface that we started with becomes the new interface, right? Like in a weird way, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that just like the challenge about that take is that it assumes that the machines can go and do everything without a human. Like it'll loop back, right? It'll go machine to machine to machine in perfection without humans needing to check it along the way. Yeah. And the problem is to check certain pieces of data. You probably noticed this when you're using Cloud Code or any terminal. The terminal is a horrible interface.
Yeah,
it really is for visualizing data. Like if I'm building a data visualization for you in terms of our compensation grades, right? And we want to put that all on a screen, and I'm testing that out in the terminal, and I'm not allowed to look at the browser.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be able to develop that visualization. But then, some people might say, why do you need the visualization? Like, you just can look at it pulls the numbers back into the terminal, and the numbers are what's important. Well, then, why did we do data visualization in the first place? We could have just pulled numbers, right?
Yes.
And so I think there's this, I think our hot take at Mando is that interfaces will always exist as humans exist in the enterprise. If humans exist in the enterprise, they're going to need an interface. Yeah. And in fact, that interface is going to be increasingly complex. Yeah. Right? It's not going to be increasingly simple. I would argue like the simple stuff is going to be taken by the agents, right? Those interfaces don't need to be complex. But then when a human's looking at the data, because the agents can go and pull in way more into the interface becomes crazy important. Yeah. And so there's like a mispricing event also with like Figma. You've probably seen this.
Yeah.
Like UI software and people saying like, oh, UI is dead and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, man, oh man. Let's see in 3 years, right? What happens? Yeah, I think especially in complex enterprises, you have dashboards, interfaces, whole work environments. Like someone wakes up 9 to 5, they spend time in the interface you've engineered for them. Okay, and like, and they love the way that the buttons look and the charts look and where things are, and they're used to it. And then you're going to say, hey, here's a chat window now, and every now and then there might be some issues, and you might not be able to visualize it in the same way. And there's no buttons to click. It's just everything is a sentence now, right?
Right.
It's like, I really disagree with that.
Yeah, I love this. I love the fact that you all have the perspective that you do, because not only are you guys using AI, not only are you guys a software company, but the fact that you're using AI, building software, and doing it in the context of like enterprise, right, is absolutely amazing. You guys have a perspective that is like very, very unique. And so I love the fact that you called that out. And more than that, you're making bets against that. In the same way that companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are, especially with their computer use investment, right?
Yeah.
They're betting on these UIs being around and having AI agents that can navigate that user interface as well.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, a great point you brought up, right? There's so much money being spent on VLM training and actual like multimodal synthesis of UI states in the browser. It's like, I don't know, why are they spending billions of dollars on that? If that's
Exactly.
something that's not going to
Exactly.
exist, right? It's like, yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can appreciate that in a whole lot of ways, Yeah, it just feels good to know that somebody's out there advocating for our efficiency and really our career in a lot of ways, right?
Do you want to see it, by the way, Christian? Do you want to see kind of some of the new interface that we've built?
Absolutely,
Like,
yeah, please.
let me share this with you real quick because I think you'd find this exciting.
For sure.
Yeah, give me a quick second here. There we go. Can you see this tab, by the way?
I can, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so what you're seeing here is kind of like, this is purely in the lab. This is something brand new that we're going to be launching probably end of Q3,
Okay.
realistically. But we're testing thoroughly. And so here you can see this kind of like graph of data at the top, and then you see a bunch of cards. So what's happening is kind of like what I alluded to earlier. We have my Chrome extension, and my Chrome extension is running on my browser. And so it's tracking. It's also been installed on Avi's side, Amanda's side, Tom's side, and Jessica's side, right? And so you can see that Avi right now is active inside of production with Amanda. And you can see that Tom and Jessica are in Sandbox. This is really helpful because if you're testing, right, knowing someone else is in Sandbox is obviously just crucial. At a quick glance, you can see it in our UX at the top. And then obviously you can see across all of your application environments, like what the activity has looked like across everybody. So if I wanted to single out myself and I wanted to see what I've been doing in production, I can see, right? And I can even look at that across weeks. I can look at the insights in terms of session activity across the team. So I can see like, hey, this past week we had 50 sessions, right? Compared to looking at, this month, for example, if we calculate it, it's like, okay, way more sessions, and this uptick probably suggests that we have a go live that's approaching. So the system's now able to actually do intelligence because at the end of the day, all the work happens inside of the browser, right? So we're actually like making this system way more intelligent. And I think probably the coolest thing is like all of these sessions that you have here, if I clear these all out. So you can take any of your sessions, which I can show you here, and you can turn these sessions directly into training guides. So this is kind of like AI docs, right? But AI docs kind of in a different way where you're no longer going to the Chrome extension and then recording. It's already recorded, right? You could just go back into your sessions and you can turn anything into a training guide. So in this case, if I want to grab this and I want to turn this specific session into a training guide here, there we go, right? It'll turn this into a document, right? And you're probably used to this AI docs view, right? And then it'll turn into a viewer. I can toggle through these steps. I can share this with a stakeholder because this is very easy to follow along. They can even go and comment on it, right? They can like at anyone who is the author of the document.
Oh my gosh.
I don't understand this specific step, right? Making it way more collaborative with the admin. Obviously, I can share this out. I can download it. Probably the coolest thing is anything that I've gone and recorded now also gets recorded as a process diagram. So this is kind of like the brain of Mando here, right? This is showing you across every single module, what has the extension seen in terms of what you've been configuring. So you can see from each session, it's going and pulling up the data, and then it actually has the raw process itself. So we're kind of working on what the bounding boxes are going to look like around these nodes, but yeah, you can see this is a bit of a work in progress, but this is the brain of Mando, right? This is just from us using it over the last 3 weeks, what it's seen in terms of what we've been doing. It logs your meetings. So this is one of the coolest features. It'll join your meeting. So if you have stand up in the morning, a lot of our admins are remote. They're not all in one room. They're configuring Workday in various time zones, right? So when you join the meeting and you start talking, every single task, every priority, every single thing is actually pulled up inside of Mando. Earlier, I had asked this question like, hey, pull up every time we discuss payroll, right? And it came back and it pulled every single meeting with the transcript with where that was mentioned, right? And I can see all of my future meetings here. And then I also have everything that's integrated into Mando, right? So in our case, we use SharePoint, we use Confluence. Those files are now inside of Mando. They're trained inside of Mando. Anytime I add something in SharePoint, it'll show up here, right? This is a live connector between both systems. And then I can run tests. This is probably one of the coolest things that a lot of people have been asking for. But basically, I can turn any of my sessions into tests. And I can tell an agent to go and run it in a cloud sandbox and come back and tell me what it didn't notice that it should have noticed, right? So kind of end to end, right? Like if you think about what we've built, there's no integrations into Workday itself, right? We don't integrate with the Workday tenant, right? But it's probably the most information on your Workday tenant than pretty much any other software that is out there. And that's all the contextual configuration data around the tenant itself.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, super quick demo. I'm sorry, I kind of like speed ran through that.
No, I love
I
it.
didn't do a great job of showing this.
Honestly, I mean, people know how to find you and reach out to you, right? We'll get into all of that at the end, and I'll have links in the show notes as well. So,
Yeah. What were your thoughts off of what you saw, by the way? Because it's very different than what you've been using.
very different. Very, very different.
Yeah.
I think you've taken a very helpful process, right, in being able to record our screen, go through a process, even talk through a process, right, and have that turn that process into an AI doc that we can then search by. Incredibly helpful process, right? You've taken all of the manual work away from us. Right?
Totally.
You've taken even just the having to think about it and remember it away from us, right? And we just do what we do normally. It is the most behind the scenes integration that I've ever seen, right? And it's not an integration, right? Which is probably why. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
is amazing.
It's super behind the scenes, right? We actually, in one of our preview tenants, we had one of our consultants accidentally go and basically they launched a task that logged us all out.
Oh, wow.
Of the
Okay.
Preview tenant. I don't know what task name that is, but we were able to find it through passive capture, right? And we were able to see
wow.
like, hey, we just logged into Mando, filtered by the time in terms of when people were in Sandbox, and saw like, okay, this actually did happen, right? So we had like a super quick to be able to pull it up, and then being able to just pull in your entire day, because an admin's a combination of like what you talked about in the meeting, everything you've documented, everything you've seen in your browser from the last 3 months, right? Like that's all being computed in your brain in real time. And so it's like, how do you digitally enable an admin with all of that? So that's kind of where we're headed, right? And I think the reason why I brought it up is because you brought up CloudBot, and it's like an agent that's running in the sandbox, and very similar to kind of the infrastructure that we have to crack to be able to run testing. Because yes, Mando, when you install it for your organization, it's like a set of eyes, right? It can learn about your tenant really well, but that's only, we want to execute off of that, what it's learned, right? And how do you do that in a secure way? How can the agent go and run the process step by step? What if it doesn't see something? How does it do dynamic step tracing? What if it has to enter parameters or enter auth or do multi-auth, log in as one user, log in as another user, right?
Yes.
So it's a massive build, but it's been probably one of the most exciting things to build out, because then, Mando, which has the capture layer, now has an execution layer. Right.
Yes. Yep.
And so I think for an admin, it'd be something that they would really, really badly want in their arsenal, right? And something that like makes us super excited to build specifically for them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that. I mean, going back all the way to the beginning of the conversation, right? That's essentially what's happening in the software development world, right? You're thinking about a feature, you're describing that in some way, shape, or form, and then you're just letting the agent go off and execute it, right? Yeah. I can see our roles as Workday admins and Workday leaders becoming the same, right? Just working out the specifications, giving that to Mando, and just letting it go off and do its thing, right? Especially from a building perspective, but also from a testing perspective as well, right?
Totally, right? And being able to ask the right questions. I think that's going to be the most important skill for any admin. I think I might have even said this on a podcast before with you, the last one we did. But I think, it's just the ability to for the admin to truly be strategic, ask the right questions up front. Because even in the meeting that you guys have with stakeholders, time is limited, right? You don't have all the time with the stakeholder at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
You can't just keep pulling them. Maybe you can ping them a couple times async, but that's it, right? And then it's like you use that information and then you run with it. And they're either going to be happy with it or they're going to be really upset at you. So context matters, right? For people to be able to ask the right things up front. And then when the agent goes and does its thing and comes back, to be able to actually iterate on what it did, to tell it what it did wrong. That's actually, it's like literally managing a team of analysts in a way.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's still important to have the knowledge of what's a correct action versus what's not a correct action, right? So the role of a Workday admin is probably going to be changing, but that knowledge is going to be even more valuable now. So let's talk about this, because I think this is going to be a very important debate as well, and one that I'm very curious to hear your perspective on. In your opinion, do you think we'll see a lot of citizen developers within the enterprise? Yeah. And if so, what do you think they'll focus on versus maybe a more traditional software organization like Mando?
Totally, yeah. That's actually what honestly any software vendor like me should be stacking ourselves up against, which is if you're building a product that deep down inside, the only reason why they don't have the product is because they don't have budget for an engineer.
Yeah.
You're not building something that they should be budgeting for, in my opinion. And so one thing that we've started telling people is, because sometimes we get the pushback, right? we recently partnered with Anthropic. Like, why would we use Mando, right?
Yeah.
And what we tell them is try to build it. Try to build Mando, right? And like, you know, if you can get the same, and we'll give you our product and compare both.
Yeah.
Try your best. But and so that's kind of like, I don't know. Some people might say it's like cruel. I just think it's the market, right? And it's
Yeah,
just like,
absolutely. Yeah.
at the end of the day, the best product wins, right? So it's like if you've really taken the time to understand a user, you care about that user a lot to the point where, you know, you spend pretty much all of your time with your team trying to think of like every single tool that needs to be in their belt, how it aligns, what the architecture of that roadmap looks like. That's the stuff that like hiring a dev at your company to support the HRS team, they're not going to think that way, right? They're going to think 9 to 5. Yep. What are my specs? Oh, I need to build out this automation. Let me build it out. So it's like you never get that greatness out of the product that will be built internally. You know, you need someone outside, some weird obsessed guy, right? So like me and Adi to just really, really obsess about the problem and build something entirely different, right? That kind of changes the entire way the admin works. I do think internal developers will be really good for building automations, right?
Yeah.
Like I think like blocking and tackling basically, right? If there's simple technical things that any team, HRS team, finance team, any non-technical team is blocked on, they should be able to, at this point with Claude Code, be able to get them around the hump. But yeah, I think when it comes to, products that are like productivity driven or driven towards a specific user, it's almost like a net negative to do it internally. It makes way more sense to externalize that, right? And so, that's kind of hopefully where we want to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of that is still yet to be determined. I think some companies are trying their best to figure out like what's going to be more DIY versus, you know, let's just look at an external vendor for this, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So that'll be really, really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Can you quickly touch on like all of the maybe hidden details that go into building for the enterprise that maybe like the citizen developer wouldn't necessarily think about or have the skills to like build around?
Oh, I think the citizen, when you say the citizen developer, I'm picturing like an internal engineer who's been hired at a company, right? To like basically internally build things out. So I would say like, they're still at the company, right? They're still at the enterprise. They have good knowledge of their specific enterprise, but I think that's the challenge, is that they have their knowledge of their specific enterprise. With Mando, since we've launched, we've talked with over, 250 plus HRIS leaders, really just on HRIS, not even including like folks on, SAP, ServiceNow, other sides, right, where we're chatting with leaders. So it's like, I think when you start to see the vast amount of use cases, the challenge becomes how do you actually bring that into kind of like this centralized user experience? Everyone's going to log in and basically see an amalgamation of kind of the same thing, right? And so like, what does that look like? You don't even get that perspective when you're automating for a single enterprise, right? So when you're building that product, it's very narrow, it doesn't transfer. And if the business ends up, changing rapidly, that product's going to be out of scale, right? So it's like to keep it, like I think it's almost like even if you think of Claude Code itself, right? Like now that Claude Code exists, are companies internally going to basically be building their own, automations and tools that they would have otherwise been doing with something like Claude Code? I think it's yet to be determined, right? Like I think Anthropic's heavily going after businesses and trying to sell enterprise Claude Code. But I think the technical complexity of it, along with the fact that you're at one enterprise, like that's probably what's going to handicap the quality of the product or whatever is getting built, right? Basically, if what the HRS team needs, like if your team comes together and you're like, hey guys, I need this always on recording Chrome extension that can only capture configuration and no PII at capture and at rest, and it needs to be enterprise grade secure, and then we need a retrieval system over it. An engineer is going to look back at you and be like, dude, what? Like, give me an entire like Series A round to build that, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how are we going to do that? So it's like technical complexity. They won't even be able to grasp that kind of platform because they're not at 20 different companies seeing 20 different admin use cases, right? So it's like, I think it's technical complexity and then, seeing it at a bunch of different places at once.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually wrote it down in this way on the outline for this episode, but like getting something to the point where it's working versus getting something like working for the enterprise, two completely different ballparks. Like we're not even on the same playing field here, right? And some of those things for me like are logging, right, for audits, security, right, authentication. There's just so much that has to play into whatever software you're building or whatever functionality that you're building that like those are all, pretty, not necessarily new topics, right? But new from the perspective of building software, right? Which is what these agents are doing.
Totally.
So that is like fascinating. And also frustrating, as someone who likes to build on their own, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Let's talk about the individual, right? I empathize with anybody who's out here and is just desperately trying to keep up with everything that's happening in the AI world, right? So
Yeah.
I want to speak to them. How would you answer the question of like how the work that Workday administrators are doing today, how is that going to be shifting as AI starts to move more into the enterprise?
Totally. Yeah, I think kind of what we mentioned right ahead of time, which is like this persistent backlog at every application support team, right, that exists under the planet. Like every single application support team has a consistent backlog. It's a massive backlog. They can't get to things that they want to get to. And so they're running the system. They're not engineering the system, right? So the shift from like running to engineering, I think, is something that's going to be happening. Question then is like, okay, Neelan, how does that happen? At which enterprises does that happen at the fastest? Like, where do we evolve? A mix of like kind of what management, and I'd actually ask you this, Christian, because I have a perspective from our customers, right? But I'm curious, even for you being on the client side, right? Like, have you ever felt handicapped at your organization in terms of like technology that you could use or things that you could learn? Like you could totally learn it, you could totally build it, but then for whatever reason, you're not able to take it through to the finish line. Like, do you feel like the organization feels that way? Because I would have to guess that that's a massive factor that plays into the acceleration of the admin. It's like, hey, if the government that's running the business doesn't want it, then it's like the admin's going to be stuck in a lot of old ways. So yeah, curious about kind of how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think being who I am, that's one of my biggest frustrations, in doing this type of work at this point, right? To your point, I think the admin is going to become a lot more strategic, which is going to require fully understanding the business, how it operates, how it makes money, right? We're going to need to understand the business in that way because we're going to need to be a lot more strategic about where we invest our tokens, where we invest our time, where we invest our energy and our vision, our attention, right? All these things. Because I think pretty soon our output is just going to be so much more that, these tests, for this brand new integration, they're going to be taken care of for the most part, or at the very least, like very, very accelerated compared to what they used to be.
Totally.
So I think we are going to be a lot more strategic, and the admins who can be the most strategic are going to be much more valuable, in my opinion.
Totally. Yeah, I think what I'm curious about is kind of like how that shift truly gets enabled on the ground, right? Because every single time I go and talk to an admin team, even though like usually before I go and check in with our customers, I read news about them.
Yeah.
Like just so I know, like, I don't know, it would be embarrassing if I hopped on the call and they just like did a big acquisition I didn't know or something like that. So I read the news, right? I read the news, and then when I'm reading the news, sometimes there'll be these AI announcements, right? Yeah. And it'll sound like really cool. It'll be like, whoa, like this they seem so AI forward, right? And I'll hop into the call and be like, hey, I saw this on the news that you guys are doing this. And they'll kind of look at me and, in their head, they're still thinking about like the backlog that they have, right? That it's like that's not gonna shift. Like that backlog's still there, right? Yep. So unless the AI can come in and solve this backlog that's here right now, like I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna have to be the one to do it. And then next week I'm gonna be doing the backlog too. And then next week I'm gonna be doing the backlog too. So when do I get to this forward-thinking work? Right? And that's kind of where I started with the process question, which is kind of even how I would say I would challenge customers when I'm in vendor conversations with them, which is like, look, if you're not going to take the investment to move towards that shift, but you're just saying, oh, AI is coming, we're going to shift there. It's like, that's just not going to happen. Like, your admin team is, and the way most companies will do it, they'll let the admins handle the backlog. They'll bring in some AI transformation person. That person will intern 3 months later. And it's just like, that's not the right way to do it, right? The right way is to set up these systems for enforcement, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't, if it's not a Mando, you need to be doing this on your own, right? Like you need to be documenting every single one of your processes, because when agents come, for an agent to go and automate the work, to go and automate the backlog, you're going to have to spend just as much time in front of the screen talking to the agent and instructing it if you didn't write it down.
Yeah. Exactly.
Simply, right? So it's like
exactly.
Not even just write it down. This is now this is going to sound so biased towards Mando, but it's like you can't just write it down. You kind of need to document it, right? You can't just write down your steps. Yeah. You need to document it. If you clicked on a button, it needs to know that you clicked on this button that's to the left of another button.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Like
exactly.
Even if I don't know if you've used computer use models, right? But if there's like two buttons with drop downs, for example, you say click the drop.
They're bad. Yeah. Yep.
It's going to struggle. So then when you keep going to this like logical loop, you start to realize you're like, oh shit, I need to document every Like literally
Yes.
everything, including even maybe console logs, right, on the browser and like everything that's happening in the application. Like I need to know everything that's going on. And yeah, I think for the teams that do that and like take that step, then it's like logical. Like yeah, of course. Like then yeah, an agent will 100% rip on that infrastructure and be really good, whether it's Mando's agents or someone else's agents, right? It's like
Yep.
it's going to be able to execute, it has the context. But if you're not setting yourself up for context right now, I don't think you're ever going to get to that backlog. I don't think you're ever going to be able to get strategic. And if your organization is just playing smoke and mirrors about it, like probably recruit somewhere else. It's
Absolutely.
like most likely not going to change is my hot take on it, right? Maybe we have to edit this afterwards, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that is going to be a bottoms up approach because I, just to your point, right, it takes context. And so I do wonder how valuable these Workday admins who are adopting these AI agents and experimenting, just how valuable they're going to be to those organizations who are ready to make that shift, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and again, that might be biased towards me, right? But I really
Yeah.
do think that it's going to take a little bit of both, right? It
Oh,
needs
totally.
it needs the right people on the bus from a context perspective, but also from a leadership perspective as well.
100%. Yeah, yeah. I think definitely, yeah, on the flip side of it, it's like, oh my God, for the organizations that do operate under that infrastructure, like which execs are going to be more happy? The executives with the applications that are actually being strategically configured, or the execs that are looking at the applications as a cost center?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
come on, right? Like, it's
Yes.
just. So yeah, I think a lot of this is like human decisions being made by the big bosses, right? That are like kind of playing puppet master here, right?
Yeah.
It's up to them, right? Like, do you wanna live in that future or not? And I'm seeing obviously our customers like completely being on the flip side of that, right? Like they're like
Yeah.
adopting Mando in and of itself, I would say is like pretty revolutionary. It's a Chrome extension, right? It creates documentation. Sometimes it's recording your screen and you're looking at it and you're like, hey, is this recording my screen? What is it looking at? What is it taking, right? So it's like it does take a little bit of a mental leap to be able to understand that like, no, this is actually a secure system. It trains our tribal knowledge and it basically saves us when one of our admins wants to walk out of the door. We still have all of the knowledge. It just takes a leader who can logically make that jump, right? That's pretty much
Yeah.
it. And that's how every single one of our customers has found success. It's like every single one of them has a leader or a champion who's very forward thinking, who's just like, nope, this is how we should be doing it, pushes that forward. Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting with more of those leaders. Yeah, and to the people that don't see the benefit in it, I think they'll eventually, like, they'll have to catch up, right? Because
Yeah.
there's going to be way too many cases where CIOs are going to conferences and hearing from other CIOs that their enterprise apps team has no backlog and in fact has A/B tested 32 different interface flows for just one segment of department, something that they never thought they could even do. And now everybody at the company that used to say Workday looks clunky says it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
When you hear that, you're going to feel like you want to shoot yourself in the foot,
Yeah.
like as the CIO who didn't do that. I think, I feel very passionate about these things, so you can hear me rambling about it, but that's my overall take. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think your passion is like so contagious because like you're just making me as a Workday admin look like a champion, right? Look like just a 10x
that.
developer, right?
Yeah.
On my end. And just yeah, you're taking my skill set to a brand new level where it's not limited to my ability to search community. It's limited to my ability to understand the business and make good, sound decisions.
Exactly.
That is going to return an investment on this majorly expensive system that we get to support, right?
Nailed it.
Yeah. So I'm really, really thrilled about that possibility, that potential, right? And
Yeah.
I again, it just feels good. Like I sleep really good at night knowing that you guys are trying to solve this problem
Totally. Yeah.
because you're just going to make me, the best version of me possible. So I
100%.
am
Yeah.
so glad
Yeah,
that you guys are doing this.
that is totally the goal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and we definitely want to be like, the almost like the the last tool that an enterprise application, like the VP of enterprise apps at a company, the last tool that they need to be buy for their entire admin team should be Mando in theory. That's why we're going and building things like a meeting recorder, like small things that genuinely, that doesn't take us a lot of engineering cycles to do, but it saves the team the idea of having to go and buy a Fireflies AI or some other random vendor and then integrate that into the system and then manage all that. It's just kind of like, it's the last tool we need to ever buy, right? We buy it, we're good to go. We're ready for the agentic future. That's hopefully, how people see us. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, again, kind of speaking to the individual who might be a little bit lost in the sea of all the news happening, right? What would you recommend for them to really focus on to start to get comfortable with AI, or maybe even to develop their skills, right? So like
Totally.
maybe I'll toss a couple things out there just to see what your thoughts are about like exploring, right? So
Hmm.
something like skills, right? Or MCP or CLI or clause even, right? Or these agent swarms, like where's the noise versus maybe just the signal, right? Like
Yeah,
where should somebody focus a little bit more?
yeah, I mean, skills. I would start with skills, and for anyone listening, it's kind of like what I said earlier. Skills, a fancy word for documentation, just
Yeah, it's
writing
just instructions. Yeah.
instructions, writing down your stuff, right? It's like you
Yep.
could have even done this before skills was even like termed, right?
Yeah.
You could have used LLMs with just instructions,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
The only thing is LLMs have gotten, way better. Context windows are way larger, so they can read through a bunch of these instruction files and grep the correct one, right? So it seems
Yes.
like it's knowledgeable, but even with skills, you do have a lot of degradation, right? Like if you
Yeah.
load up fat skills, 100 fat skills into an LLM and you start asking about one skill, it will start to hallucinate and it won't
Yep.
have the type of recall that you'd expect it to have when it's carrying out a task. So, but yeah, I would say skills basically for anyone not knowing, it's just instructions like what Christian mentioned, write them down. Whenever you notice at work like, that you have like a somewhat like you do like a set of automated like an automatable process, right? For example,
Yes.
you respond to an email in a certain way whenever it comes from a certain person and
Hmm.
you notice yourself doing that, immediately just open up, I don't know, your favorite LLM. Just be
Yeah.
like, hey, I want to build a skill, and just talk to it about kind of what you do. And it will go and build that into what's called a markdown file, which is just what's the easiest format for the LLM to read the instructions. And then from there, every single time you go back to the LLM, you can just tell it to use that skill, all right? Like, hey,
Yes.
use that skill, generate me this email. Use that skill, generate me the reply. And then you just copy paste the replies. There we go. You just automated a part of your day. So I actually think those kinds of things are kind of useful, right? The only
Yes.
problem is when you start to go really hard with it and you start
Yeah.
making skills out of everything. Like I said, the architecture is not a brain. So
Yeah.
because the architecture is not a brain,
Yeah.
it's just you're honestly polluting the context with that many skills that you're adding into it, and you end up with the opposite problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just so that people kind of understand how skills are created and being used, sometimes the LLM will decide to create some sort of additional resource to help it understand what it is that you're looking for on the this task, right? So sometimes the skill will come with a Python script or some sort of template, something that the LLM will use to try to produce that same skill that you created the first time.
Totally.
Um, if you don't nail it there, you can obviously interact with it and say, "Hey, why'd you do this?" Or
Yeah.
can you change this?
Yeah.
But again, all of it is polluting your context to a
Totally.
certain extent, right?
Yeah, and I've
Still
seen
worth
people
doing, in
like
my opinion. Yeah.
100%. I've seen even what you just mentioned. Like they'd have to go and debug the skills file, right? So now they're
Yes.
debugging their
Yeah.
code, they're debugging the skills file, and it's just like, oh my god, like that's what a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for
So
non-technical people, like that
exactly
can
right.
be more of a pain. But again, still worth experimenting, in my opinion, because with that experimentation, you'll start to understand like the limitations, and then also some use cases where it like works brilliantly and it's amazing.
Yeah, totally.
So absolutely, skills. I think I can see skills being applied. Maybe even across the landscape, right? I know that some of the major players are allowing for skills files to be implemented. But again, that's just one of those things that is a little bit more noise, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would agree. I think it's just at the end of the day, writing down your instructions, like, tale as old as time. That's what you
Yeah.
need to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a good way to manage a bunch of instructions, I guess. But what I did was even before skills, I used to have on my desktop just prompts that were saved to do
Yeah.
certain,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? That was basically like my hacky skills system before skills
Yes.
existed. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think generally speaking, like just go off and explore.
Yeah,
Just see
100%.
what these things are doing because I can't even imagine all of the progress that's been made since, March of 2025 to now the time of this recording, which is March of 2026. I can't imagine what we're going to be talking about in March of 2027, right?
Oh
So,
my God.
yeah, I think learning the limitations of the models today absolutely important, but just
Yeah,
know that like I think I said this on the last episode, right? Like this is the worst that Mando is going to be, right? So like that's
yeah,
exhilarating. Like
totally.
wow, what a time to be alive. So
Yeah,
um
100%.
yeah, so let's go ahead and land this plane. But I did want to ask you just a couple generic questions, right?
Go for it.
So,
Yeah.
man, the world that we're in right now is just completely different. What would be like a very general piece of advice that you would give a Workday admin who's really trying to maybe push a little bit more and further develop within their career in today's age?
I would definitely say like curiosity, curiousness. Main reason I say that is because there used to be a time when you were curious, and if you would go back and forth with an LLM, it would just hallucinate outputs left and right. And some people would actually like, I don't know, you probably read about this, like LLM psychosis. They would believe what the LLM said, right? And it's like a huge thing. Actually, fortunately now, a lot of these LLMs come with this thing called study and learn mode. So you can turn that on, and you can also turn on like web search. So if you're using your LLM, just go to the bottom left, select the tools, right? Turn on study and learn, and then turn on web search. So that way, if it doesn't know anything, it's going to go and look it up on the web. And then when it pulls a source, kind of just like Mando, right? It always cites a source, so you can always check what the AI is pulling from. It's not hallucinating anything. And I think just doing that, it's honestly like really been helpful for me personally. Like one area that I've always wanted to get more sound in is just like macro. Something that very like interests me a lot. Obviously, this year is crazy, and the macroeconomic environment wise, is a fun year. What a time to learn about it, right? But yeah, previously I would totally just throw myself into like, I don't know, one of Dalio's books and, really just brood over it, think a lot about it, write about it. But now I just find myself kind of doing self-directed learning on like any macroeconomic topic I find interesting. And being able to pull reputed sources while I'm doing my research. And it's kind of just like a learning box in a way, which I think is insane. I don't know, I've never learned in that way, like self-directed learning, it's all, learning's pretty much always been prescribed in a way, right? Like someone coming up with the course or the guidelines or whatever it is. And so, that ability to just like, pretty much learn about anything. If you have an internet connection, it's possible now, and $20 a month for these services. That would be my biggest advice.
I love it. Absolutely. Listen, I just want to say, thank you so much for all that you and Adi are doing, and the rest of the team as well.
Of course.
You guys are doing the Lord's work from a Workday admin perspective. So I really appreciate it. So I did want to get people connected with you in case they were interested in, getting a demo or just talking about AI strategy in general.
Totally.
What's the best way that people can reach out to you and the team?
It's Neelan at joinmando.com and joinmando.com, which I'm sure Christian will have a link to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All of those links will be down in the show notes, so definitely feel free to check it out. You can reach out to myself as well. I actually talked to a couple of people about Mando and just people who were just generally curious about the system and my experience in the system as well. So I'll offer that out as well to anyone interested. But Neelan, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are crazy busy right now, but like always, let's keep this conversation going for sure.
Totally. Thank you again, Christian. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Be sure to check out the helpful links and resources mentioned in the conversation in the podcast show notes below. Also, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter to stay in the loop about future podcast episodes and Workday tips. I'm Christian Delcid on LinkedIn and at cdelcid21 on Twitter/X. I would love to hear any feedback about how to make this podcast better, so be sure to subscribe, connect with me, comment, and share with others. Thank you so much again. Have a great day. The Unsafe Harbor podcast is my personal passion project, and it is completely separate from my role with my current employer or the Workday organization. The ideas expressed on this podcast are my own and do not represent my employer or the Workday organization.